Good evening. As we come on the air live in the Pacific time zone, there is breaking news. President Trump announcing a short time ago that he has ordered U.S. airstrikes on targets in Syria, and those strikes carried out with allies Britain and France are now underway. This in response to a deadly chemical weapons attack against civilians in Syria 1 week ago. The latest atrocity in the horrific civil war in Syria, now in its 8th year. We're still learning details of this airstrike. NBC's White House correspondent Kristen Welker is at the White House tonight with the very latest. Kristen, good evening.
Lester, good evening to you. President Trump called that chemical weapons attack in Syria the crimes of a monster as he announced precision airstrikes tonight. He stressed that this was done in coordination with U.S. allies, the U.K. as well as France, and he had very sharp words for Iran and Russia.
Assad's recent attack and today's response are the direct result of Russia's failure to keep that promise. Russia must decide if it will continue down this dark path or if it will join with civilized nations as a force for stability and peace. Hopefully, someday we'll get along with Russia and maybe even Iran, but maybe not.
The White House stressed that relevant congressional leaders were briefed before this action was taken. And a little bit of background to all of this. A few days before that chemical weapons attack in Syria, President Trump had expressed his desire to get out of Syria. Now this crisis pulling him back in. He's been debating with his national security team throughout the week about just how strong the U.S. response should be, which allies would be involved. We know that the president has been calling for a very robust response. Now, it was a year ago that the U.S. launched very targeted airstrikes against Syria in the wake of a chemical weapons attack. Then the president speaking in very personal, emotional terms about the images of children who were suffering. You heard him speak very emotionally again tonight. But the question that remains, Lester, at this hour, just how strong will this response be?
All right, Kristen,
Lester.
we're seeing the activity behind you, recognizing a late and busy night there at the White House. Thank you. We want to turn now to our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel in Istanbul. Richard, what are you hearing from there?
So this is not what I had been expecting in conversations I've been having with U.S. officials. The U.S. is now engaged in an open-ended commitment in the Middle East. President Trump said that this is not just going to be a one-off attack, that the U.S. is prepared to sustain these attacks until Bashar al-Assad stops using chemical weapons. That is a much different mission. That is effectively a new war in the Middle East. Already, there are reports of explosions in Damascus, explosions in eastern Syria, and a short time ago, the Syrian state television broke into its programming to announce that the country's air defense systems have launched counterstrikes to confront what it called the U.S., French, and British aggression on Syria. So we will see if those counterstrikes are effective. The U.S. has been taking great pains to make sure that the pilots or missiles involved in this are protected. But there are significant risks because the Syrian government is not alone. It is backed by Russia. It is backed by Iran. Both countries have forces on the ground.
Yeah, let's pick up on that thought, Richard. They have a lot of air defense capability there. You also have Iranians and Russians there. A very risky battlefield, especially if some of these missions are being flown by manned aircraft.
The danger is also what happens next. I've been told by U.S. officials that there's a lot of coordination that has been happening, at least with the Russians. That the U.S. Pentagon does not want the Russians to become involved in this. That they've been communicating U.S. intentions very clearly to the Russians. I haven't heard as much coordination happening with the Iranians. Both countries have troops on the ground. But what happens if this continues? It's easy to communicate with the Russians and the Iranians, potentially the Iranians, about the first day of the strikes. But if this is in fact an open-ended campaign, then it has the potential of effectively being a very slippery slope.
All right, Richard Engel in Turkey for us tonight. Thank you. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here. And click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.